Early 1945. Soviet artillery is audible from the east, and somewhere in the Owl Mountains of Silesia, a heavily armored train eases into a tunnel cut straight through the rock. Then the entrance is sealed, rock and rubble piled across the mouth. The engineer never comes back out. Decades pass. Forest reclaims the hillside. The tunnel mouth disappears under root and soil and 70 years of rainfall. For 80 years, if the train exists at all, it has sat in the dark beneath those mountains, waiting. And that single word, if, has swallowed treasure hunters, government money, and at least one culture minister's career.
In August 2015, Poland's deputy culture minister, a man named Piotr Thurchowski, stood before the press and announced he was 99% certain that a Nazi gold train had been found buried beneath the Owl Mountains near Wałbrzych.
99%. A cabinet minister. That's not, we have a promising lead. That's a man putting his whole professional life on a treasure map.
And he did it before a single shovel had touched the ground. Two amateur hunters, a Polish man named Piotr Koper and a German named Andreas Richter, had already filed a legal claim for a 10% finder's fee on whatever came up.
They filed for the fee first. Before digging, that is either extremely confident or an incredible scam, and honestly, I respect both options equally.
Polish soldiers were deployed to secure the perimeter around the site. The international press descended on Wałbrzych, a post-industrial city of about 120,000 people that had not seen that kind of attention in decades. The legend's core claim is this: in late 1944 or early 1945, as Soviet forces pushed west through Poland, the Nazis loaded an armored train with looted gold, jewels, stolen artworks, and classified Third Reich documents, drove it into a tunnel in the Owl Mountains, and sealed the entrance.
Walk me through the geography. Why the Owl Mountains specifically? What made that location strategically useful to the Nazis in 1945?
Because the ground there is genuinely riddled with tunnels. Project Riese, the German word means giant, was a massive verified Nazi underground construction project in those exact mountains. At minimum, 7 separate tunnel complexes were carved into the rock, all built using forced labor from the Gross Rosen concentration camp.
So the tunnels are real. That's the part that makes this story harder to laugh off than I would like.
Right. And historians still argue about what Project Riese was actually for. Some say FH Rear headquarters, others say armaments manufacturing. The purpose has never been definitively settled.
On top of that, the scale of Nazi looting was documented and enormous. Estimates run between 600 and 800 tons of gold taken from occupied Europe. Allied forces recovered a significant portion after 1945, but a meaningful amount was never fully accounted for. Lower Silesia was a known Nazi logistics corridor in the war's final months, so routing something valuable through there was not logistically absurd.
600 to 800 tons. That's not we misplaced some stuff. That's a whole economy's worth of missing metal.
And there is one more thread that keeps this story alive, a documentary piece of paper. What's the 5-page letter about?
The Silesian Bridge Foundation holds a letter reportedly written by the grandson of a wartime railway worker, describing a sealed tunnel and a train. It's not verified, but it's the closest thing to a paper trail the legend has, and local families in Wałbrzych have been passing the story down orally since the 1940s. Locals have called it the ghost train for generations.
Wait, so the tunnels under those mountains, they're open. People can just walk into them?
Some of them, yes. The Riese complex has multiple entry points that are partially accessible today. There are tour operators running groups through sections near Oświęcimia and Walim. But the key word is partially. The full extent of the network has never been mapped. Engineers estimate there are sections that were sealed or collapsed before the war even ended.
And that's the structural problem with debunking this. You can't prove a negative in a tunnel system you haven't fully charted.
It's like trying to prove there is no dragon in a basement you've never finished exploring. Classic.
Exactly the issue. Project Riese consumed enormous resources. An estimated 13 million working hours of forced labor from Gross Rosen prisoners, who were worked under brutal conditions, building something the Nazi command never publicly explained.
Okay, so in September 2015, Koper and Richter went on Polish television. What exactly did they show?
They presented a georadar scan, essentially a ground-penetrating radar readout, which they claimed showed an anomaly at roughly 70 meters depth, consistent in shape with a tunnel containing 3 separate wagons.
3 wagons, 70 meters down. They had a number and everything. That's either genuinely compelling or the most confident guess I have ever seen.
Here is what I kept coming back to when I dug into the coverage. Who ran the georadar scan?
That's exactly the problem. The scan was not conducted by an independent party. Koper and Richter's own team ran it. No external geophysicist reviewed the raw data before they went on television claiming irrefutable proof.
So the evidence and the interpretation of the evidence came from the same people with a financial stake in the outcome. That's not irrefutable. That's a pitch deck.
A pitch deck where the ask is 10% of a treasure train. Bold Series A.
And when journalists pressed further on how they initially located the site before running any equipment, the Jerusalem Post reported that the team's primary discovery method was radiesthesia, dowsing, a pendulum or divining rod used to detect buried objects. The georadar scan came second after they'd already decided where to look.
Dowsing is not recognized as valid by any mainstream scientific body. There have been controlled trials going back decades that show it performs at chance. This is important context that got buried under the minister's 99% statement.
So the culture minister staked his career on something that started with a pendulum. That's not a treasure hunt. That's a science with paperwork.
In December 2015, the Krakow University of Technology published the results of their independent ground-penetrating radar survey of the same site. Their conclusion was unambiguous: no train, no tunnel structure consistent with a buried vehicle.
And crucially, they identified what the anomalies actually were: natural rock formations and pre-existing excavations from Project Riese itself. The tunnels that were already known to be there were producing readings that Koper and Richter had interpreted as wagons.
So the evidence for the train was the tunnels everyone already knew existed. That's like finding your keys in your pocket and calling it a miracle.
It's a clean illustration of confirmation bias in practice. You go looking for a train, you find an anomaly, and the anomaly becomes a train because that's what you were hoping to find.
I want to flag something for the comments here. Alex just called it confirmation bias, and I think that's generous. When your primary tool is dowsing and your secondary tool is equipment you operated yourself, bias might be understating it. Alex thinks this was bad science. I think it was closer to theater. Tell us which side you're on down there.
Morgan going full prosecutor. I am here for it.
Now the logistical argument against the train is actually separate from the radar debunking, and it's worth taking seriously on its own terms. Moving a heavily loaded armored train into a sealed tunnel in early 1945 would have required functioning railway infrastructure, fuel, and a labor force, all of which were in acute short supply as the Reich was collapsing.
And there is a document problem. No German railway records, no Wehrmacht logistics paperwork, no testimony from surviving railway workers has ever placed a specific train on that route in that window. For a movement of that scale, you'd expect a paper trail somewhere.
The Nazis documented everything. These were guys who filled out forms about their forms. If a train full of national treasure moved through Silesia in January 1945, somebody wrote it down.
That's actually one of the stronger counterarguments. The regime's administrative apparatus was obsessive about record-keeping, and the silence in the surviving German railway archives on this specific movement is a real evidentiary gap for believers to explain.
Though, to be fair, a lot of records were deliberately destroyed in the war's final weeks. Absence isn't proof of absence here. It's genuinely ambiguous.
Which is exactly why this story hasn't died. Because the Riese tunnel network itself remains incompletely mapped. Historians still haven't reached consensus on what the complex was even built for.
Wait, seriously? They built it, and nobody knows why.
The two leading theories are Fettwehr headquarters, a relocation of Hitler's command bunker, or a large-scale armaments factory. Neither has been definitively proven because the construction was never finished, and the relevant orders were likely destroyed. Incomplete maps mean the searches have never been exhaustive.
And the search keeps getting official sanction. Polish authorities issued a new excavation permit in January 2026 to a fresh research group near Wałbrzych. A separate team as recently as July 2025 claimed they had an undisclosed new clue, though they haven't said what it is.
An undisclosed clue. In 2025, 80 years later, this train has better staying power than most Netflix series.
All right, let's sort this into what we can actually confirm versus what the legend is running on. Project Riese is real. Full stop. A massive Nazi underground complex in the Owl Mountains, built with gross Rosen forced labor, with tunnels that remain only partially explored decades later. That is not in dispute.
And the broader looting is confirmed at scale, hundreds of tons of gold and valuables taken across occupied Europe, with a portion that Allied forces never fully recovered or accounted for after 1945. The missing wealth is real. The question is only where any specific portion of it ended up.
So the setup for the legend is historically solid. Real tunnels, real missing gold. That's a better foundation than most conspiracy theories get.
Confirmed on the 2015 side, too. A sitting deputy culture minister made a near-certain public claim. Polish soldiers secured the perimeter, and the state committed real resources to an unverified story. Whatever you think of the train itself, that government response actually happened.
And confirmed on the debunking side, the Krakow University of Technology's December 2015 independent radar survey found no evidence of a train at the claimed coordinates. That result stands. No subsequent survey has overturned it.
So what's speculated? The specific armored train, the 3 wagons, the 70-meter depth, the contents, gold, documents, artworks. All of that rests entirely on radiesthesia and oral tradition, with zero corroborating documentary or physical evidence recovered so far.
The confirmed facts are genuinely compelling, and the speculated facts are a pendulum over a map. That gap is doing a lot of work in this story.
Here is the line the search keeps running up against everything specific about the train, the 3 wagons, the 70-meter depth, the cargo, traces back to a pendulum and a family story. Not a single piece of recovered physical evidence, not one corroborating document from any archive, has placed that train in that tunnel.
And yet the search permits keep getting issued. That's the part that interests me. Polish authorities aren't closing the file. January 2026, a new group gets clearance near Warajik, officially sanctioned ambiguity.
Officially sanctioned, ambiguity is just bureaucracy for, we don't know, but we are not saying we don't know.
That's actually a fair read. The permits reflect the fact that the Riese network hasn't been fully charted, which means no search has been truly exhaustive. The absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence when you haven't finished looking.
Right. Which is what keeps this in the speculated column rather than definitively closed. The radar debunking addressed one specific claimed location. The mountain is bigger than one location.
Okay, so why does this story keep breathing? Because it's not just a treasure hunt, it's sitting on top of something real.
That's exactly it. The legend is parasitic on documented history. It borrows the credibility of 2 verified facts. The Nazis really did build those tunnels, and they really did loot on a scale the world has never fully accounted for. Strip either of those out, and the story collapses immediately.
It's a structural advantage most conspiracy theories don't have. The conspiracy theory about, say, a hollow moon doesn't have a real moon-sized tunnel to anchor it. This one does.
That's the difference between, I think there is treasure in my backyard, and I think there is treasure in a backyard that used to be a mine. One of those is easier to take seriously.
And then there is the economic layer. Wałbrzych lost its coal industry when the mines closed in the 1990s, high unemployment, population decline, the kind of post-industrial decline that hollows a city out. When the 2015 story exploded globally, the town saw a surge in tourism. Tour operators, hotels, local guides, the legend has direct monetary value to the region, regardless of what's under the mountain.
So there are stakeholders in the story continuing, not because they're lying necessarily, but because the search itself generates economic activity.
The train doesn't have to exist for the hunt to pay off. That's a better business model than the train.
The deepest hook in this story, though, is psychological. The Holocaust produced an almost incomprehensible volume of theft. Gold from families, from communities, from institutions. Most of that wealth was dispersed across hundreds of transactions, laundered into post-war economies, simply gone. A sealed train is a different kind of story.
It gives the theft a possible ending: recovery, restitution. A physical object that can be found and returned.
And that matters. Like, genuinely. I know we've been pretty skeptical this whole episode, But the idea that there is a place where the stolen wealth of an entire civilization might still be sitting, waiting to be given back, that's not a crazy thing to want to be true.
The alternative is harder to sit with, that the gold is simply dissolved into the world economy. Untraceable, unrecoverable. No closure, no restitution, no ending. A sealed train under a mountain at least keeps the ending possible.
Which is why the permits keep getting issued and the clues keep surfacing. The story does something for people that the historical record can't.
If you want more of this, real history, real evidence, and the occasional pendulum, we are here every week. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one.
Whatever is under the Owl Mountains, rock formations, the last sealed sections of Project Riese, or something no survey has found yet, the search keeps getting official sanction. New teams, new equipment, new permits. The Warbzik gold train has outlasted every debunking so far.
Next week we are going inside Area 51, not the alien version, the documented one. The government's own declassified records describe what actually happened inside that fence. And honestly, the real story might be stranger than the extraterrestrial explanation. Don't miss it.
And if you think no, the alien version is definitely more plausible, come argue about it in the comments. That's what they're for.
Next week we are going inside Area 51, not the alien version, the documented one. The government's own declassified records describe what actually happened inside that fence, and honestly, the real story might be stranger than the extraterrestrial explanation. Don't miss it.
And if you think no, the alien version is definitely more plausible, come argue about it in the comments. That's what they're for. If you want the evidence-first version of stories like this every week, hit subscribe and ring the bell. We will show up in your feed.